If I'm talking to young screenwriters, and I'll be asked, how did you get your start? And I'm always reluctant to tell the story because my story is such a, you got hit by lightning. It doesn't happen the way it happened with me. I'm Aaron Sorkin, and this is the timeline of my career.
I have neither the time nor the inclination to explain myself to a man who rises and sleeps under the blanket of the very freedom that I provide, and then questions the manner in which I provide it.
I got out of college, where I was a theater major, came to New York, had a whole bunch of survival jobs. I bussed tables, I drove a cab, I dressed up as a moose and passed out leaflets in Times Square, but mostly my steadiest survival job was working as a bartender in Broadway theaters. I wrote most of A Few Good Men on cocktail napkins at the Palace Theater during the first act of La Cage aux Folles. And what I was thinking was, I can't wait till I'm done, and then I can have a bunch of actor friends over to the apartment, and we'll all read it. I thought that was the end of that. I had taken a break to write a one-act play so that I could submit it to a one-act festival. My brand new agent, my first agent, said, do you have anything else? And I said, well, I'm working on this full-length play. I gave it to him. He called me and said, this is terrific. We're going to send this to our West Coast office, and we think we can get you staffed up on a TV show. I wasn't cocky. I was just, I guess, naive. I was just about plays. So I said, well, that sounds nice, but what about doing the play? And remember, I'm still a bartender, kind of shrugging off we think we can get you staffed on a TV show. That night, my agent, he happened to be standing next to a woman who was the development director for a legendary producer named David Brown, who produced The Sting, who produced The Verdict, who produced The Jaws. The development person said to my agent, David had a great time making The Verdict. He really wants to do another courtroom drama. Do you know of anything? My agent literally had my A Few Good Men script. 4 days later, and it only took 4 days because David Brown was on a safari in Africa. David came back, he wanted to meet with me, and here's where things got really crazy. David said, I love this and I want to option the film rights. I'm still a bartender at the Palace Theater. And I said, well, the thing is, I really want to see this done as a play. He said, well, what if I were to do it as a play first? I still didn't jump at it. I said, well, have you ever produced a play before? He said, no, but what if I brought in Robert Whitehead to produce it with me? Robert Whitehead produced the Broadway debuts of Tennessee Williams, William Inge, Arthur Miller, and in a stunning anticlimax, me. Then I got to stop bartending. I miss it a little bit.
Did you order the code red? I did the job. Did you order the code red? You're goddamn right I did!
Is there anything I can say other than the president rode his bicycle into a tree?
He hopes never to do it again.
Seriously, they're laughing pretty hard.
He rode his bicycle into a tree, CJ. What do you want me? The president, while riding a bicycle on his vacation in Jackson Hole, came to a sudden arboreal stop. What do you want from me?
A little love, Leo.
The West Wing happened entirely by accident. My agent asked if I would like to have lunch with the television producer, John Wells. And I'd never met John. I knew his work. I knew him as a producer of really some terrific TV shows, ER, China Beach. The night before the lunch, a couple of friends came over to my house for dinner, and one of those friends was the writer Akiva Goldsman. He'd not yet won the Oscar for writing A Beautiful Mind. I had a little office in the basement. We snuck down to the office to have a cigarette, and there was a poster for a movie I'd written, The American President, on the wall. And I told him about the lunch I was having the next day with John Wells, and he said, gee, you know what would make a good TV series? That, and he pointed to The American President, and he said, you know, if you forgot about the romance between the president and the lobbyist and kind of focused on the senior staff, that'd be a good series. And I'd say, yeah, but I'm not going to do a TV series. I'm just having lunch with him. I'm not there to pitch a series or anything. I went to the lunch the next day, and I saw that as soon as I walked in, that it wasn't just a getting to know you lunch, because John was already there, seated at the table with several executives from Warner Brothers and a couple of CAA agents. And I sat down, and almost immediately John said, so what do you want to do? Meaning, what TV show do I want to do? And instead of saying, I think that there's been a mistake, I don't have anything to pitch you, I really just came here for lunch, I said, I want to do a TV show about senior staffers at the White House. John reached across the table and said, you got a deal. So I left there saying, oh my God, what just happened? I have to write a pilot script for a show about senior staffers at the White House, and all I was thinking was that I was going to have to write a pilot script because there was no way this was going to get on the air. Sure enough, it didn't get on the air at first, but the next year there was a change in the top management at NBC. Two guys, one Scott Sassa and Jeff Zucker, they read the script and they said, we're doing this, which is basically how it happened. It was 88 hours of television that I wrote in 4 years.
From what part of Holy Scripture do you suppose the lambs of God drew their divine inspiration when they sent my 12-year-old granddaughter a Raggedy Ann doll with a knife stuck through its throat?
$18,000?
Yes.
In addition to the $1,000 you'd already put up?
Yes.
A total of $19,000 now?
Yes. Hang on. I'm just checking your math on that. Yes. I got the same thing.
There was a book proposal going around town, and I was told about this. I was having lunch with a fantastic woman who's been the chairwoman of 3 different studios, Stacy Snyder, who ran Universal, ran DreamWorks, and ran Fox. And we were having lunch, and she told me about a book proposal that was going around about Facebook and 2 lawsuits that Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook were facing. One, these 2 identical twins who were claiming that Zuckerberg stole Facebook from them, and then the other person suing Zuckerberg was his best friend who had somehow gotten cut out and was owed about $1 billion.
You better lawyer up, asshole, because I'm not coming back for 30%. I'm coming back for everything.
That sounded interesting to me. Was not then nor now, nor am I now on Facebook or Instagram. I don't have a Twitter account. I'm not a Luddite. I'm really not. Social media has just never been interesting to me, and I'm grateful for that because chances are, if it was, I would never do anything else but that. The person I said yes to was Scott Rudin, the producer Scott Rudin, who owned the book proposal at this point. I thought what was going to happen was I would have a year before I'd even have to start thinking about it because the book had to be written. And then I'd read the book and I would try to write an adaptation. But I found out, no, the studio wants me to start now. You're not going to wait for the book. You're going to write it while the book, these 2 things are just going to happen simultaneously. Ben Mesrick, who was writing a book called The Accidental Billionaires, he's going to be writing that. You're going to do your own research and do your own thing. But I really did become interested in Mark Zuckerberg as an anti-hero and writing him without judgment. The way you have to write an anti-hero is if they're making their case to God, why they should be allowed into heaven. What it seemed to me, my interpretation of events, was that a guy who wasn't smooth at socializing, which is something I can identify with, who wasn't having the kind of college experience that everyone else seemed to be having, because we always look around and think that everybody's at a party that we haven't been invited to. He managed to create a social structure wherein he is the mayor, and this social network, the world's most successful social network, was that it was created by the world's most antisocial guy, was very interesting to me.
You're not an asshole, Mark. You're just trying so hard to be.
There is absolutely no evidence to support the statement that we're the greatest country in the world. We're 7th in literacy, 27th in math, 22nd in science, 49th in life expectancy, 178th in infant mortality, 3rd in median household income, number 4 in labor force, and number 4 in exports. We lead the world in only 3 categories: number of incarcerated citizens per capita, number of adults who believe angels are real, and defense spending.
The newsroom would end up being tough for me. I was never able to get it quite right. I always felt like I had a pebble in my shoe. Felt like I could write a good scene. I could put a couple of good scenes together. A football team at the beginning of the season will talk about how they had a good quarter or 2, but they can't put together a full game. I was never able to put together a full game. Without my realizing it, I was giving a mistaken impression. Beginning with the very first episode. 2 mistaken impressions. One was Will McAvoy's America Isn't the Greatest Country in the World speech. What I was writing was a scene about a guy having a nervous breakdown. He's not doing the kind of thing he knows he should be doing. He's selling out a little bit. They call him the Jay Leno of news, which back then meant something. The woman he was in love with left under painful circumstances. And now in this auditorium at Northwestern, it was his I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore. And just like Howard Beale, he was having his own breakdown. I wasn't lecturing America on what was wrong with it. Then later in the episode, they get news over the wire that an offshore oil rig off Louisiana has exploded and there's a massive fire and a date comes on the screen. And we realize that everything that we've been seeing has been in the recent past, that it's a year and a half ago, 2 years ago or something. And because everything would be set in the recent past, I think that there was a feeling that I was trying to show the pros how it ought to have been done. That we're going to do this again, only we're going to give it the West Wing treatment. We're honorable, people are doing it right, obviously leveraging hindsight. And I wasn't trying to do that. I said it in the recent past because unlike the West Wing, where I felt comfortable until 9/11, where I felt comfortable creating a parallel universe, I didn't feel safe making up news. I didn't think it would be real. Part of the fun were going to be big breaking on news events, and I didn't want to have to say we're being attacked by Argentina. I didn't want it to be silly. And so the news will be real. It was just meant to show people trying to put on the news in a world where, you know, doing the news and profit concerns are always competing.
First step in solving any problem is recognizing there is one. America is not the greatest country in the world anymore.
Everything else is working. Skip over the voice demo.
We need it to say hello.
You're not hearing me. It's not going to say hello.
Fix it.
Fix it?
Yeah.
In 40 minutes?
Fix it.
I can't.
Who's the person who can?
I'm the person who can, and I can't.
I said to Scott Rudin on the phone, not really angry, not out of frustration, just, you know what I would really like as a screenwriter? I would love to have it in writing. I don't have to make a change in the script that I don't want to. That neither the studio, nor the director, nor a star can say, I want to cut this monologue or I want to do that. That it's mine. I had that phone conversation with Scott Rudin, and 5 minutes later, Amy Pascal, who was the chairwoman of Sony at the time, called and said, I'm going to make your dream come true. I want you to adapt the Steve Jobs book, and you're going to have the terms that you want. Scott called me back and said, I really think that we should do it because do we really want someone else to do it? And I said, no, let's go for it. Even though I've never been a Steve Jobs acolyte, still, even after learning a great deal about him and writing the movie, I don't quite get what the genius was. Rectangles without corners. He definitely made a very successful company, but I still don't get it. Neither does Steve Wozniak, and I knew that was going to be fun friction between the two of them. But I had a tough time with Steve Jobs, the subject matter, not the person who was no longer alive, because I was the father of a young daughter, and I simply couldn't at all relate to somebody who was so horrible to his daughter. For the first 9 years, I wouldn't even admit that she was his daughter. I just thought, I understand anti-heroes and writing them like they're making their case to God, that why they should be allowed into heaven. I'm not sure this guy should be. I'm just not finding anything that's going to make us want to stay with him. And the person who helped me with that was Lisa Jobs. I met with a whole bunch of people in Steve's life. A lot of time with Wozniak, a lot of time with the character Kate Winslet played, a lot of time with the character Jeff Daniels played, but I spent a lot of time with Lisa Jobs. Once she let me into that world, I felt like there might be a movie to write here, but what I didn't want to do was a biopic. I didn't want to do a story that began with a little kid looking in the window of an electronics store and ended with his very tragic death. I wanted to do the opposite. I wanted to compress it. So I called Scott, I called the studio once I kind of knew what I was going to do, and this was after months and months of research, and said, listen, what I'm thinking of doing is writing this entire movie as 3 real-time scenes. 3 40-minute scenes that each take place backstage before one of Steve's product launches. They said, that sounds great, go do it. And so I was really happy to be able to write a film in a sort of non-cinematic scope.
How bad are you saying?
It's pretty bad.
Molly Bloom, self-proclaimed poker princess.
Is that Us Weekly? Yeah, I would agree. It would be unusual for them to print something that wasn't true. But it's not true. And if you think a princess can do what I did, you're incorrect.
After I wrote The Social Network, the producer, Scott Rudin, and Amy Pascal at Sony, they thought that I should direct it. But we all agreed before we make that decision, let's give the script to just one director. Because we know how great David Fincher would be at this, right? So let's just give it to David. Let David pass. And then I'll consider becoming a director suddenly at this point in my life. And 3 hours later, I got an email from David saying, "Hey Aaron, it's Fincher. I'm going to direct The Social Network. Can I come over?" And I've never been so happy not to get a job in my life. I love David, and no one could have done as good a job as he did. And I do love that man. With Molly's Game, I turned in the first draft of Molly's Game. I met Amy Pascal, is now no longer chairwoman of the studio, but she is a producer of Molly's Game, along with Mark Gordon. We meet for dinner with a list of directors that we want to go to, and we go through each name on the list, pros and cons. When we got to the end, they said, "But we think you should direct it." They told me why they thought I should direct it, and I said, "Let me think about it, okay? Let's talk about this again after the first of the year." And it came back in, and I had thought about it, and the reason I really was leaning toward directing it was I felt that with Molly's Game, and if you see the movie, I think you'll understand what I'm talking about. I felt like there was a gravitational pull toward the shiny objects in the story. All the money and the movie stars, the bold-faced names, and the money and the money and the money. And I didn't want that to be what the movie was about. I didn't want the one sheet to be Jessica Chastain throwing chips up in the air like that. For me, it was the story was more interesting. It was just more personal. I just had something different in mind. Well, the best way to make sure that gravitational pull doesn't get its grip on the movie is to be the one doing it yourself. So listen, after I'd been a professional writer for 25 years, more than that. If you stood next to Mike Nichols long enough, Danny Boyle long enough, David Fincher long enough, Tommy Schloney long enough, you would really have to not be paying attention at all to not learn something from these people. It really was just an extension of the writing. It was just staying longer with the screenplay. And I discovered all this time I've kind of been directing things as I'd been writing them. So there was a lot to learn. There still is a lot to learn. I'm feeling more and more comfortable doing it. And it was because of Molly's Game, Steven Spielberg was sufficiently pleased with Molly's Game that he thought I should direct Chicago 7.
When was the last time you slept?
It was a while ago.
My problem is that for the next 50 years, when people think of progressive politics, they're going to think of you. They're going to think of you and your idiot followers passing out daisies to soldiers and trying to levitate the Pentagon. So they're not going to think of equality or justice. They're not going to think of education or poverty or progress. They're going to think of a bunch of stone-lost, disrespectful, foul-mouthed, lawless losers. And so we'll lose elections.
All because of me.
It was in 2006. I was asked to go to Steven Spielberg's house on a Saturday morning. He told me that he really wanted to make a movie about the terrible riots that happened in Chicago in '68 and that crazy conspiracy trial that followed. And I said, that sounds great. Count me in. I want to write that movie. And as soon as I left his house, I called my father and I asked him what happened in Chicago in 1968 and was there a crazy conspiracy trial that followed. I had no idea what Steven was talking about. I was saying yes to Steven, and I heard the word trial in there, and I liked that. I was saying yes to that, too. There was a lot of research to be done. The day after I turned in the first draft, the Writers Guild went on strike, and that strike lasted a long time. By the time we all got back, there were other commitments that people had to tend to. I found myself flying to London to meet with Paul Greengrass, who wanted to direct it now. And then I spent some time with Ben Stiller, who wanted to direct it. Really what the problem was the riots. The riots were a budget buster. A movie like Chicago 7, obviously the budget has to somehow be in proportion to what the studio imagines the audience appetite is going to be. And there were riots and tear gas in this movie. By the way, back in 2006, I remember the last thing Steven said to me was, I really think this film should come out before the election. He was talking about the election in 2008. And then we thought the movie should come out before the election in 2012, and then before the election in 2016. So it was the election of Donald Trump, the discovery that he was by magnitudes worse than our very, very low expectations for him were in the first place, and what that was doing to the country. It was the combination of that and, like I said, Steven seeing Molly's Game and feeling like, okay, we shouldn't look for a director anymore. It's coming out right when it should. Look, the film was plenty relevant back when we were making it last winter. We didn't need it to get more relevant, but it did in chilling ways. I was asked the other day if I changed the script at all to mirror events in the world, and no, I didn't. The world changed to mirror the script in astonishing ways. The most significant way, these violent clashes between peaceful protesters and the police, with many people blaming the protesters and many people blaming the police. Demonization of protest as being anti-American. The tension between Abby and Hayden mirrors the tension that we feel now between the left and the further left, between the more pragmatic left, looking for incremental change, trying not to scare anybody off, and mostly trying to win an election so that we can do something, anything. And the people further left who are tired of incremental change and want to start breaking things. Watching CNN's coverage of Kenosha, of Minneapolis, of Madison, I thought, you know what? If you just degraded the color on that film a little bit, it would look exactly like the file footage we used from 1968. Bad times generally produce good art, so we can look forward to that. I have a hunch most of us would prefer good times and bad art, but I hope that once it's safe to do it, that people start going back to theaters, movie theaters and stage plays. Watching something with an audience is different than watching it alone. Being part of an audience, there's nothing that can replace that experience. So, and I don't think it will disappear. It's something that's been around for thousands of years. But I am eager for that to come back. Thank you very much, Vanity Fair. I hope you enjoyed the timeline of my career.